As I emerged from work, a chill clutched my heart. My parking space was as barren as a desert, and the absence of my beloved 2023 Camry made me want to scream. No shrapnel of glass, no tow sign lurking ominously, just a patch of asphalt taunting me. I shook with disbelief, desperately checking the space again, muttering no, 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 like it might magically return. But nope, my hard-earned prize was still MIA, and all I had left was panic. Desperation led me to call my parents, expecting some solace or guidance. Instead, their response delivered a swift jab to my core, winding me like I'd been punched in the gut. Wait a second, I thought this can't be just a theft gone wrong. No, this was something more serious, a deeper betrayal that felt all too familiar. I had grown up thinking that being the strong one was a badge of honor. Apparently, it just made me an easy target. Meet Grass, 30 years old, software engineer, and perpetual peacekeeper living in Denver. For as long as I can remember, I've danced in the shadows of responsibility while hovering on the edge of invisibility. Outwardly, I polish a composed image, clean blouse, soft makeup, steady voice. Inside, well, let's just say I've turned swallowing emotions into an art form, with hurt and frustration piling up like unwelcomed roommates in my gut. As a kid, I watched my parents dote on my younger sister, Elena. She was the delicate one who needed constant protection, while they assumed I'd withstand any gale. The imbalance was glaringly clear, especially during our teenage years. I was slinging burgers to fund a used laptop while my folks lavished her with a shiny new MacBook for her projects. The ground shifted beneath me that day, but I kept pretending it was all fine. Spoiler alert, it really wasn't. Elena had this magical ability to borrow my things and invariably return them in shambles. Case in point, she took my bike one afternoon and returned it 2 days later, a rusted heap with a torn seat, like a stray out of a horror movie. My father shrugged it off, saying, "Don't be dramatic." The lesson was stark. For Elena, good intentions were the protective cloak, while impact was trivialized. Being the strong one came with its own set of rules. Just confirm your silent suffering as no big deal. College pushed me further into the vortex of responsibility. I juggled 2 jobs, lived on instant coffee, and wrestled with the constant pressure to thrive on my own. Just when I thought I'd caught a break, I discovered my meager savings had magically vanished, only to discover they'd been used to bail out Elena academically. My mom brushed it off with a cheerful reminder that family helps family. Fairness. I stopped counting on that long ago. Fast forward to my proudest moment. After years of sacrifices and self-sufficiency, I finally bought my first new car, a sleek, silver 2023 Camry. It was everything I dreamed of: clean, reliable, and just mine. At last, a moment of ownership that felt legitimate, tangible. I thought I could finally drive away from the past and the disappointments that followed me like an unwanted shadow, but little did I know, life had other plans in store. Each payment I made on my car felt like a tick mark on a victory chart. My parents always showered me with congratulations, but there was this flicker in their eyes, like my achievements were throwing their world into disarray. Meanwhile, Elena was on her 3rd totaled car in 5 years, with my folks replacing each one without batting an eye. But my car. It was a different story. It held every late-night drive, every scrimped dollar, every proud moment I'd fought tooth and nail to earn. When the dreadful moment came, and I saw that empty parking spot, it didn't initially register as a theft. Instead, it felt like déjà vu, a well-worn pattern I had been trying to escape all my life. Just like any sane person, I launched into explanation mode. Maybe I'd parked on a different level, or perhaps some overzealous tow truck operator made a mistake. But after 4 laps around the parking lot, the icy realization set in: my car wasn't just misplaced. It was gone. My heart raced, contractions of panic tightening my chest as I fumbled my phone. I figured I'd reach for the lifebuoy, my parents. When my mother answered, her upbeat tone caught me off guard. I stammered, "Mom, my car's gone. Did someone tow it?" She replied all casual, as if discussing the weather, "We gave it to Elena." She needs it more. Just like that, casually dismissive of my 6 years of sacrifice like it was a borrowed sweater. Wait, what? I stammered incredulously. You gave it to her. My mother followed up with her usual logic. Elena had a new job, buses wouldn't suffice. You'll manage a few days, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. In that parking lot, I felt frozen, feeling the world around me blur while the loud thrum of my heartbeat filled my ears. My recovering dad weighed in, it's still in the family. Nobody's overreacting. Oh, how easily he dismissed my feelings. I whispered, reminding him of using my college savings for Elena's classes. That never helped me. Silence hung between us like a thick, stubborn fog. Mom sighed, her disappointment palpable as she admonished me not to start again. Your sister's had a rough time, she said, but her words were exhausting after a decade of same excuses. Images flooded back, Elena's tears after her first accident, my parents hugging her like she'd narrowly escaped a grave disaster. There was the memory of her second accident, an extreme texting while driving fail, and then the third, where all I could do was listen to my mom lamenting that she needed support, not judgment. 3 cars wrecked in 5 years, and now my pride and joy, the only new car I'd ever owned, was just handed over like an afterthought. Mom, I said slowly, feeling every word ride the wave of betrayal, I didn't give anyone permission. You took my keys. You took my car. We borrowed it, she insisted. The depth of that word cut through me, familiar yet stinging like an old bruise that refused to heal. Everything I had swallowed all those years, the hurt of their choices laid bare. That was the moment it snapped, all the pretending was gone. Every boundary they'd ignored, every time they told me I was strong enough, but, boy, was I not feeling strong at that moment. My rage simmered just beneath the surface, cold and unsettling. Give Elena a few days, my father insisted, like he was blindly optimistic. But I knew better. No, I said she won't, I replied, my heart pounding. My mother's voice sharpened, a knife cutting through the air. Don't do anything stupid, Grain. But they had already revealed their cards family. It had been the shield for every transgression, and I was the one expected to stay compliant. It was a shocking revelation that day. I was no longer their quiet, obedient daughter. With resolve hardening in my chest, I pulled the phone away from my ear, my mother still scolding, but I was done listening. I hung up, muttering to myself, and dialed 911. In 20 minutes, Officer Ruiz appeared, the sun slowly dipping behind the Denver skyline, soaking everything in a warm, orange glow. As she stepped out of her patrol car, her mere presence steadied my shaky nerves. I handed over my documents, registration, insurance payments, my fingers still trembling like leaves in a storm. All under your name, she asked, and I confirmed confidently. The moment felt monumental. I was no longer just a family member but a person standing firm in my own right. Nobody had permission to take it, I stated firmly, and it felt like a protective spell shrouding me. The sound of my sister's name, Elena, crackling over the radio punched me in the gut, sending shockwaves through my core. But Ruiz didn't sugarcoat it. Family theft is still theft, she declared. The law had room for no exceptions. Hearing that, a realization washed over me like a wave. I'd spent my life twisting myself into a pretzel for others. Now, someone was drawing a line in the sand, a line my family had ignored for too long. As Ruiz left, the parking lot felt as immense as my emotions, empty and achingly quiet. I perched on the curb, staring into the vast asphalt expanse, a bittersweet reflection settling over me. This should have been a victory, but guilt tangled itself around my heart. My parents' critical voices replayed in my mind like a broken record, selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. Those labels felt like a heavy cloak, and as I trudged back to my apartment, the sanctuary I once adored suddenly felt alien, like walking through a ghost town of memories. Tea boiled in my hands, tasting metallic as I sank into my couch, the city lights flickering against the windows like my wavering spirit. Reporting my family wasn't a casual choice. It gnawed at every thread of loyalty I had, ripping apart my inherited scripts. Yet the thought of Elena joyriding in my car, perhaps flashing pictures to friends claiming it as hers, twisted my insides. The silence following my report from both my parents and Elena was deafening and glaring. It screamed everything my heart didn't want to acknowledge. Later, my phone buzzed with a flurry of unknown numbers, relatives insisting I drop the report, not shuffle the family deck. "Don't ruin the family," echoed with every call. Yet not one of them bothered to inquire if I had a ride home after all this. For the first time, I let that phone ring. This wasn't strength, this was exhaustion transforming into resolve. They'd crossed a line, and instead of erasing it like I always did, I was determined to confront it. 3 days after filing the report, while my eyes barely stayed open at the desk, Officer Ruiz's name popped up on my phone. My heart raced as she announced, "We located your vehicle." Relief and dread fought for space in my chest. "Your sister was stopped for speeding near Aurora, and the car is impounded." Impounded. The word hit like a brick. I was relieved, yet furious. My gut twisted as I asked the dreaded follow-up, "And Elena?" "She's fine, being questioned now." Of course, she was fine because Elena always bounces back. I thanked Ruiz, but the guilt surged once again, thick and suffocating. My sibling was wrapped in a police station drama, all of which I'd set into motion. My relatives were buzzing around my parents like bees to honey, sharpening their phones to point at me like I was some supervillain. Sure, I felt a tinge of guilt, but beneath that emotional storm was a cooler sensation: justice. I could sense it bubbling up as I hopped into a rental car to reclaim my rightful wheels from the dastardly impound lot. With floodlights slicing through the evening, I was ready for battle. As I stepped onto the concrete at the warehouse, the echo of my footsteps was the only thing louder than my pounding heart. A clerk, barely acknowledging my presence, shoved papers my way. "Camry Silver Space 34, he muttered. Each passing row felt like a mini-marathon, my anticipation building until there it was. My beloved ride, but a far cry from the pristine vehicle I had parked. Fast food wrappers were strewn about like confetti, and who knew how that spilled energy drink got there? It was a disaster zone, and my emergency blanket lay crumpled in the back like a discarded prop. "Do you want to tell me about it?" came a voice behind me. To my horror, it was Officer Ruiz, complete with a steely gaze. I swallowed hard. This wasn't how I pictured my reunion. She surveyed the wreckage in my car, the disappointment palpable in the air. "This kind of carelessness is pretty typical," she remarked, her tone brutally honest. It struck a nerve. I braced myself against the door, realizing this was a pattern. The bike mishaps, the funds diverted. Elena had been taught that she could play fast and loose because consequences were just mere suggestions. After navigating the paperwork like an obstacle course, Ruiz slipped the keys into my palm and lingered a moment. "Remember, accountability isn't cruelty," she said firmly. Those words echoed in my mind, shaping a mantra for the storm ahead. A week later, I found myself in the waiting area of Courtroom 4B, which smelled sharply of disinfectant. My parents were sitting across, whispering intensely in Spanish, while Elena was wedged in between them, avoiding eye contact like it was a game of dodgeball. The moment we shuffled into the courtroom, the air thickened with anticipation. The judge, a woman with piercing eyes that could probably cut glass, called on Elena. "Miss Reyes, I understand you wish to enter a plea today," she stated. As Elena's voice barely broke through the silence with a timid "Yes, Your Honor," I held my breath. She unfolded her statement, her hands shaking, and faced the music. The words poured out. She took my car, knew it wasn't hers, and had decided I'd forgive her. This was the first time Elena was kicking excuses to the curb. "Let the record reflect a guilty plea," the judge said, and I felt a lump in my throat as she dished out the sentence: 6 months of probation and a year license suspension. My parents' reactions were like a slap in the face. Gasp. Hands to mouths. I barely had time to digest the news before they flowed toward Elena, comforting her. Their focus was on shielding her from any consequences, like they were a human formation in rugby. But as I stood there, invisible in their eyes, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. The courtroom emptied, but I remained planted, absorbing the chaotic whirl of emotions and choices. The very justice I'd been seeking felt oddly bittersweet. As my family enveloped Elena with warmth, I was left in the echoes of our past, realizing that while some of us learned lessons, others still sailed along, oblivious to the logic of responsibility. Would I ever break this cycle? Only time would tell. Elena brushed past me, her face a bright tomato red and eyes swollen like she'd been crying buckets. She hesitated as if words were itching to escape her, but my mom, with a firm grip on her arm, nudged her forward. Not now, my mother whispered like I was the villain in this drama. The door clicked shut behind them, and oddly, I felt a weight settling inside, heavy yet steady. My anger evaporated, leaving me surprisingly anchored, as though the part of me that had spent so long apologizing for merely existing waved its final goodbye. The gray, oppressive Denver sky mirrored my mood as I made my way to my car. This wasn't just any car, it had transformed from trusty steed to casualty in a battle of chaos. I slipped inside, running my fingers across the steering wheel. I had forgotten what mine felt like. But in that quiet cabin, something shifted. My parents had walked away, but in my heart, I felt like I had finally walked back to myself. It was both surreal and liberating as I drove home at a leisurely pace, each mile creeping between the past and my new beginning. Once I arrived at my apartment, it felt like stepping into a freshly tidied room after a chaotic party. The air buzzed with potential. I tossed the courtroom papers onto the counter, brewed some tea, and sank into my favorite spot by the window. No celebrations were in order, nor mourning, just pure reclamation. Deep within me, a small yet fierce voice began to whisper a truth I had long buried. This wasn't the end of a family, but the bold beginning of my freedom. In the weeks that followed, the noise surrounding the legal mess faded into a distant memory. Phone calls from relatives dwindled, and the guilt that once loomed over me finally fell silent. For the first time, my life felt more like a peaceful retreat than a battleground. I packed up and moved to a brighter apartment on the west side of Denver, closer to the foothills where the air was crisp and light. A new number followed, and I curated my contacts to just the good ones, those who brought respect and positivity into my life. With time, my daily routine found a soothing rhythm. Mornings unfolded in blissful quiet, long walks cleared my mind, and evenings were cherished in perfect silence. Every Thursday, I joined a small support group at a community center where the atmosphere blended understanding and healing. When I nervously shared my story, my voice trembled like a newborn deer. Yet the room expanded rather than shrank, and as they nodded, I began to feel a warmth unfurling inside me. This was the first step toward reclaiming my spirit. One sunny afternoon, while gazing over the mountains from my driver's seat, a simple revelation washed over me. Justice hadn't wrecked my family, it had helped me find myself again. A year passed, and an unmarked envelope arrived in my mailbox, instantly recognizable. Elena's handwriting sent a delightful shiver down my spine. Inside was a short, honest letter. Forgiveness wasn't begged for or thrown around, only a simple acknowledgement that she was now in therapy, grappling with her demons, and striving to be better. I folded it gently and slid it into a drawer, feeling no urgency to respond. Sometimes acknowledgement is all we need for closure. As I locked my car that evening, a radiant orange sunset highlighted the scene. A small but profound truth nestled within me. What's mine stays mine, not out of fear, but because I'd finally learned how to guard the person behind my newfound boundaries. If my journey resonated with you, type away below and let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever stood your ground like I did, hit subscribe. More real stories are on their way, and remember, you're never alone on this path.